You do not find yourself when you are constantly seeking someone else. In solitude, the soul speaks in a language no partner can translate, and when you silence the noise of romantic pursuit, you finally hear the whisper of who you truly are. There is a reason why so many of history's most profound thinkers, artists, and spiritual leaders have sought solitude at the height of their journeys. It is not because they despised people, nor because they failed to form connections, but because they understood a truth so easily overlooked in a world obsessed with companionship. You cannot truly meet yourself until you are willing to be alone with yourself. Solitude is not an escape from life. It is the crucible in which life, in its most authentic form, takes shape. When you are alone, the masks fall away. There is no audience to perform for, no partner to impress, no societal script to follow. In the absence of others, the psyche reveals itself in raw form, unfiltered, unpolished, and often startlingly honest. This is where you begin to see the fragments of yourself that the noise of daily life drowns out. The fears you've buried, the dreams you've postponed, the truths you've avoided. These moments are not always comfortable, but they are necessary, for only in confronting what you've hidden can you begin the process of integration. Solitude strips away the distractions that keep us from deep introspection. Most people fear being alone, because in that quiet space, the mind begins to speak in ways that are difficult to ignore. Thoughts surface that reveal how much of your life has been lived for the approval of others. Desires emerge that you've suppressed to maintain harmony in relationships. There is nowhere to hide in solitude, and that is its greatest gift. For what you cannot face alone will eventually control you in the presence of others. This is why solitude is a crucible. It applies heat to the raw material of your being. It exposes the weaknesses in your self-understanding, tests the strength of your convictions, and burns away the illusions you have about yourself. Just as gold is refined through fire, the soul is refined through the discipline of being alone. And make no mistake, solitude is a discipline. It requires you to resist the urge to numb yourself with constant interaction, entertainment, or distraction. It demands you sit with yourself long enough to distinguish between your authentic voice and the echo of societal conditioning. In this space, you learn the language of your inner world. You begin to notice patterns in your thinking, to trace the threads of your emotional responses back to their origins. You may discover that the anger you've carried is not truly yours, but inherited from someone else's unresolved pain. You may find that your ambitions are not the result of your true calling, but of a deep-seated need to prove yourself to people who are no longer even part of your life. Solitude allows for this kind of excavation, pulling hidden truths from the unconscious into the light of awareness. It is in this deep self-awareness that real transformation begins. Without the pressure to meet another's needs or to mold yourself into a role, you can ask the most important question: who am I when no one is watching? The answer may be liberating or unsettling, but it will always be revealing. This is the essence of self-realization, to see yourself as you are, without distortion, and to begin the lifelong work of aligning your outer life with your inner truth. Many resist this journey because it dismantles the comfortable illusions that relationships often provide. In the company of others, it is easy to believe you are kinder, stronger, or more secure than you truly are. But solitude shows you where the gaps are between who you believe yourself to be and who you actually are. This is not to diminish your worth, but to give you the opportunity to grow into the fullness of your potential without the distortions of external validation. In solitude, the boundaries between the conscious and unconscious mind become more permeable. Dreams become more vivid, insights come unbidden, and connections between past experiences and present behaviors emerge with startling clarity. You may find yourself recalling long-forgotten memories that suddenly make sense of why you react to certain situations the way you do. You may even begin to see the symbolic patterns, the archetypes, that shape the story of your life. These revelations do not come in the noise of constant companionship. They arise in the stillness where the psyche has room to breathe. There is also a profound creative power that emerges in solitude, when you are not adapting yourself to fit into another's reality. Your imagination is free to wander without constraint. Ideas take form in the space where they are not immediately judged or dismissed. Many of humanity's greatest contributions, works of art, breakthroughs in science, spiritual revelations, were born not in the crowd, but in the quiet chambers of the mind. Yet solitude is not about withdrawal from life. It is not the cold rejection of connection, but the conscious choice to return to yourself so that your connections, when they come, are not born of dependency or fear of being alone. Solitude equips you to enter relationships not as someone seeking completion, but as someone already whole. You become less reactive, less swayed by the emotional storms of others, and more grounded in your own center. And perhaps the most remarkable thing about solitude is that it reveals to you that you are far more than the roles you play. You are not just a partner, a friend, a colleague, or a child of someone. You are a complex, layered being whose value does not depend on the reflections in someone else's eyes. In solitude, you learn to see yourself through your own gaze, and in that gaze, you discover the essence of your being, unshaped by expectation, untouched by comparison, and unafraid to simply exist as you are. When you emerge from such solitude, you carry something with you that cannot be taken away. It is a quiet strength, born not of dominance, but of deep self-knowledge. It is the certainty that you can stand alone, not because you reject love, but because you have already found it within yourself. And once you have tasted that kind of freedom, you understand why solitude is not emptiness. It is the purest form of presence you can ever know. Most people enter relationships believing they are seeing the other person clearly, yet what they often encounter is not the other person's true self, but a mirror of their own unacknowledged desires, fears, and wounds. This is the nature of projection, the unconscious act of attributing to others the qualities, emotions, or motives we have not yet recognized or accepted within ourselves. It is one of the most powerful forces in human relationships, and also one of the most deceptive. When you are constantly enmeshed in the dynamics of partnership, you live in a hall of mirrors, mistaking reflections for reality. Freedom from projection is one of the greatest gifts that solitude can offer. When you are single, you remove the most immediate canvas on which your unconscious mind paints these illusions. Without the constant emotional interplay with a partner, there is far less opportunity to project your unmet needs or unresolved pain onto another person. Instead, you are forced and freed to confront those parts of yourself directly. Projection is seductive because it allows you to avoid self-confrontation. It is easier to believe that your partner's behavior is the cause of your unhappiness than to ask yourself why you respond to certain situations with such intensity. It is easier to imagine that the love you seek exists entirely outside of you than to acknowledge the absence of self-love within. But when you are alone, there is no one to absorb these displaced emotions. You begin to see them for what they are, fragments of yourself asking for recognition. This is why staying single can be such a profound period of psychological growth. Without the constant distraction of interpreting another person's actions or molding yourself to fit their expectations, you have the space to examine your own inner world. You start noticing how your mind creates stories, how it assigns motives to people that may not be true, and how much of your emotional life is shaped by experiences from long before the present moment. In this way, solitude acts as a mirror, not the distorted mirror of projection, but a clear reflection of your own psyche. Freedom from projection also means freedom from living under someone else's projections. Just as you have unconscious material that can spill into your relationships, so does everyone else. When you are in constant emotional proximity to another person, you inevitably absorb some of the traits, roles, or limitations they impose on you based on their own unresolved issues. You may find yourself carrying guilt that is not yours, playing caretaker for wounds you didn't create, or even limiting your own growth to avoid threatening someone else's comfort. In solitude, these invisible threads are cut, and you are able to move without being tangled in another person's inner struggles. The absence of projection is not the absence of feeling. In fact, it often brings more genuine emotion to the surface. Once you stop assigning your inner conflicts to external figures, you are free to experience your feelings as they truly are. Anger is no longer masked as resentment toward a partner. It can be understood as a boundary that needs strengthening. Sadness is no longer explained away by another's neglect. It can be felt as an authentic response to loss or change. Love is no longer tied to another person's approval. It can exist as a state of being within you. This clarity changes the way you engage with the world. When you no longer carry the weight of false attributions, you become more objective, more discerning, and more compassionate, both toward yourself and others. You recognize that much of what people say and do is shaped by their own unseen battles, and you are less likely to take it personally. This is the root of emotional freedom, the ability to see others clearly without the distortion of your own projections or the burden of theirs. In Jungian terms, projection is one of the primary mechanisms by which the unconscious communicates with us. It is not inherently bad. It often points to the parts of ourselves we have not yet integrated, the shadow, the inner child, the unlived potential. But if we live entirely through projection, we never truly meet the people in our lives, nor do we truly meet ourselves. We are always relating to a version of them created by our own mind. Solitude interrupts this cycle. It takes away the primary stage on which these psychic dramas play out, forcing you to turn inward and meet the source. In this process, you begin to reclaim the qualities you have long attributed to others. You may realize that the strength you admired in a former partner is actually a strength you possess but have never exercised. You may find that the criticism you felt from someone else mirrors the judgment you secretly hold against yourself. In reclaiming these traits, you stop scattering pieces of your identity across the people you encounter and instead gather them back into yourself, becoming more whole. This wholeness alters the way you will approach relationships in the future. When you have done the work of recognizing and integrating your projections, you no longer seek partners to complete you, rescue you, or carry your unhealed wounds. You are able to see them for who they truly are, rather than who you need them to be. And because you are no longer performing that role for them either, your connections become clearer, more authentic, and less burdened by unconscious demands. Freedom from projection is, in essence, freedom from illusion. It is the ability to step out of the dream you've been unknowingly weaving with your mind and see reality as it is, in yourself, in others, and in life itself. Solitude offers the perfect conditions for this awakening because in the stillness there is no one else to play the roles your unconscious once demanded. There is only you, and the parts of yourself you are finally ready to meet. There is a journey every human being is called to take, though few ever truly complete it, the journey of individuation. It is the process of becoming who you were always meant to be, of integrating the many layers of your personality into a coherent and authentic whole. It is not about becoming perfect, nor about conforming to an ideal, but about unfolding into the unique pattern that has been within you from the beginning. Yet this process is often interrupted, delayed, or even abandoned when we live too much in the expectations and emotional currents of others. Relationships, especially intimate ones, can be profound sources of growth, but they can also become arenas where we compromise our inner direction in order to maintain harmony or to meet another's needs. When you are constantly adjusting yourself to fit into someone else's narrative, the voice of your own inner compass grows faint. The work of individuation requires a sustained inward focus, and that focus is difficult to maintain when your energy is continually drawn into the dynamics of a partnership. To individuate is to discover the truth of your own being and to live in alignment with it, and that cannot be done in fragments or in stolen moments between obligations to others. It requires a kind of uninterrupted attention, a deep immersion into your own psychic material, your personal history, your dreams, and your unrealized potential. This is where solitude becomes not a condition to be endured, but a sanctuary in which your becoming can take root without interference. In solitude, there is no one to pull you off your path with the gravity of their desires or fears. You are free to follow the threads of your own curiosity, to explore aspects of yourself without needing to explain or justify them. You can spend hours in introspection without worrying that your distance will be interpreted as neglect. You can change your mind, your direction, even your identity, without the pressure of fitting that evolution into someone else's expectations of who you should be. This uninterrupted space is critical because individuation is not a linear path. It is cyclical, filled with moments of clarity, followed by periods of confusion, breakthroughs, followed by regressions. In relationships, these cycles can be misunderstood. A period of withdrawal for inner work might be seen as emotional unavailability. A sudden surge of inspiration might clash with the stability the relationship depends on. Alone, you can move through these natural rhythms without the friction of constant negotiation, without the need to dilute your process to keep it palatable for someone else. Solitude also allows you to meet the shadow, those disowned aspects of your personality that you have pushed away because they did not fit your self-image or the image others expected of you. In the quiet, with no one to perform for, you can approach these parts with honesty. You might find ambition where you once believed you were selfless, or vulnerability where you thought you were strong. You might discover passions that conflict with the life you have been living. Alone, you can integrate these revelations without the fear of how they will disrupt a shared reality. Individuation requires not only the integration of the shadow, but also the development of the parts of yourself that have been neglected in the pursuit of belonging. Many people silence their creativity, their intuition, or their unconventional ideas because these traits are not valued by those around them. Solitude lifts that pressure. When no one is there to dismiss your visions or question your instincts, you can follow them without hesitation. This freedom nurtures the most authentic parts of your psyche, allowing them to grow strong enough to withstand the judgments of the outside world when you eventually re-engage with it. It is in this uninterrupted space that you also begin to connect with the deeper layers of the psyche, the realm of archetypes, myths, and collective symbols that Jung called the collective unconscious. These are not merely intellectual ideas. They are living forces that shape the trajectory of your life. In solitude, you have the time and receptivity to notice how these patterns are playing out in your personal story. You begin to see yourself not as an isolated individual, but as part of a larger human journey, with your own role to embody. Without interruption, the individuation process becomes more fluid. There is no need to pause your inner work to manage the emotional storms of another, no need to compromise your emerging self to preserve a shared identity. This does not mean rejecting connection forever, but recognizing that there are seasons in life when you must turn away from the world in order to return to it more fully. The butterfly cannot form its wings while clinging to the branch. It must enter the cocoon, unseen, until it is ready to emerge. This uninterrupted season of becoming changes the way you will relate to others in the future. Instead of seeking relationships as a way to fill an inner void or to escape yourself, you approach them as a whole person, already grounded in your own identity. You no longer collapse into another's vision of you because you have spent the time to see yourself clearly. You no longer fear losing yourself in love because you have learned how to hold on to yourself in solitude. The truth is, individuation is not a luxury, It is the foundation of a meaningful life. Without it, you live as a collection of borrowed traits, reacting to the needs of others rather than creating from your own essence. With it, you become an authentic force in the world, someone whose presence is rooted, whose choices are deliberate, and whose life reflects the deepest truth of who they are. And to walk that path without interruption, there are times when you must choose solitude over companionship, not because you reject others, but because you are saying yes to the highest calling of your own soul. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can stand on your own, not because you reject the presence of others, but because your well-being no longer depends on them. This is the essence of self-sufficiency, the ability to meet your emotional, mental, and practical needs from a place of inner stability. It is not isolation, it is not cold detachment. It is the kind of strength that allows you to engage with the world out of choice, not necessity. And it is one of the most liberating states a human being can reach. Many people imagine self-sufficiency as a skill you develop in response to being abandoned or disappointed, but in truth, it is less about defense and more about alignment. When you are self-sufficient, you are no longer operating from the illusion that your happiness must be delivered by someone else's actions. You stop handing over your peace of mind like a fragile object for others to protect. Instead, you cultivate the internal resources to hold that peace yourself, regardless of the shifting circumstances of life. This transformation often begins in solitude, because it is in the absence of constant support or distraction that you discover what you are capable of. Alone, you cannot outsource your emotional regulation to another person. You cannot lean on someone to validate your worth when you feel uncertain. You cannot escape into someone else's plans when you are unsure of your own. Solitude forces you to build the muscles of self-trust and self-direction. At first, this can feel uncomfortable, even frightening, because it strips away the safety nets you've grown accustomed to, but over time, this very process becomes the foundation of your resilience. Self-sufficiency also changes the way you experience challenges. Without it, obstacles feel overwhelming because you are always waiting for someone else to solve them or for circumstances to change in your favor. With it, you begin to see challenges as invitations to step deeper into your own resourcefulness. You stop asking, "Who will help me?" and start asking, "What can I do?" This shift in perspective does not mean you reject help when it is genuinely offered. Rather, it means you are no longer paralyzed without it. This inner strength also transforms your relationships. When you are self-sufficient, you no longer enter connections out of desperation, fear of loneliness, or the need for constant reassurance. You are able to love from a place of abundance rather than from lack. This makes your relationships cleaner, less burdened by unspoken demands. You do not cling to people in fear of being left, nor do you shrink yourself to keep them comfortable. You can allow others to be exactly who they are because your stability is not contingent upon their behavior. From a psychological perspective, self-sufficiency is the antidote to enmeshment, that blurred line where your identity, emotions, and sense of worth become tangled with someone else's. When you stand in your own self-sufficiency, you are still connected to others, but you maintain the integrity of your own boundaries. You can give without resentment and receive without feeling indebted because your core needs are already met within yourself. The journey to this kind of independence often reveals just how much of your life has been shaped by dependency. You may notice how often you've silenced your own instincts to avoid conflict, or how many decisions you've made based on what you thought would keep someone else close. You may see how much of your happiness you have outsourced, waiting for someone to choose you, to affirm you, to rescue you. In solitude, these patterns become impossible to ignore, and in facing them, you begin to reclaim the authority you have always had over your own life. There is also a deeper spiritual dimension to self-sufficiency. When you stop looking to people as the source of your worth or the guarantors of your safety, you begin to see that your life force comes from something much larger than any one relationship. Call it the self, the soul, the unconscious, or the divine. Whatever name you give it, It is the part of you that exists beyond the reach of external approval. To anchor yourself, there is to discover a kind of security that no one can give you and no one can take away. This security is not arrogance, it is humility in its truest form. You understand that you are not invulnerable, that life will bring pain and loss, but you also know that you have the capacity to meet those moments without collapsing. You can bend without breaking because your roots are deep within your own being. This is what allows you to face uncertainty without constant fear, to make bold choices without waiting for permission, and to stand alone when necessary without feeling diminished. The paradox of self-sufficiency is that it does not lead to a life of isolation. It often deepens your connections. When you do not need others to complete you, you are free to appreciate them without the weight of expectation. Your presence becomes a gift rather than a demand. You can walk away from what does not honor you without bitterness, and you can stay in what does with genuine joy. This kind of presence is magnetic, because it comes from someone who is not trying to extract something from others, but is already whole. Ultimately, the power of self-sufficiency is that it returns you to yourself. It reminds you that you are not a half waiting to be made whole, but a complete being whose life can be enriched, not defined, by others. It gives you the freedom to choose love without losing yourself in it, to face solitude without fear, and to navigate life's uncertainties with the quiet strength of someone who knows that, no matter what happens, they will still be standing. And when you have reached this point, you understand that the greatest security you will ever have is the security you create within your own soul. Beneath the surface of our individual identities lies a vast, invisible ocean, the collective unconscious. It is the storehouse of humanity's shared memories, archetypes, and primordial patterns stretching back through time beyond any single life. You may believe your thoughts, dreams, and impulses are entirely your own, but much of what stirs within you is older than you can imagine. The symbols that move you, the myths that resonate, the fears and desires that feel inexplicably familiar. These are not just personal experiences. They are the inheritance of our species, flowing quietly beneath the stream of your conscious mind. Most people pass through life with little awareness of this deeper layer because the noise of everyday existence keeps them tethered to the surface. The demands of relationships, the pull of obligations, and the constant chatter of social interaction can drown out the subtle signals that rise from this ancient source. Solitude changes that. In the stillness, when the external world grows quiet, the deeper waters begin to stir. Patterns you once ignored reveal themselves. Dreams take on a strange but undeniable significance. Symbols emerge, carrying with them an energy that feels both mysterious and familiar. This connection to the collective unconscious is not an intellectual discovery, but an experiential one. You begin to sense that your life is part of a much larger story, that your struggles, your desires, your transformations mirror those lived by countless others across history and culture. You may not have fought in ancient battles, but you know the archetype of the warrior because it lives in you as courage, persistence, and defiance against odds. You may never have worn a crown, but you understand the archetype of the ruler when you feel the call to take responsibility for your life and shape the world around you. In solitude, you can engage with these archetypes without the distortion of constant interpersonal dynamics. When you are entangled in relationships, the psyche's energy is often consumed by the immediate dramas of connection, misunderstandings, desires, compromises. But alone, that same energy can be turned inward into the exploration of your dreams, your imagination, and your symbolic life. This is where the unconscious speaks most clearly. Dreams become one of the primary messengers. What might once have seemed like random, fleeting images now reveal patterns. You notice recurring figures, landscapes, or themes that seem to speak in a language beyond words. A mountain may appear not as a literal destination, but as the embodiment of a challenge you must face. A shadowy figure may stand for the parts of yourself you have yet to confront. These are not simply creations of your private mind. They are universal motifs, appearing in myths from every culture, rooted in the shared memory of humanity. The more you listen, the more you begin to recognize that these symbols are not just curiosities. They are guiding forces. The collective unconscious does not speak to you to entertain, it seeks to orient you, to help you find your place in the unfolding pattern of life. It offers you wisdom gathered from the experiences of countless lives before yours, condensed into images and stories that your soul can recognize instantly, even if your rational mind hesitates. Engaging with this realm deepens your sense of belonging in a way that no surface-level connection can match. You realize that you are not adrift in a meaningless world, nor are you entirely separate from others. You are participating in a vast, ongoing story, one that transcends individual lifetimes. The love you feel, the trials you endure, the transformations you undergo, all of these are part of a cycle that has been lived and relived through the ages. This recognition brings both humility and empowerment. Humility, because you see that your struggles are not unique in the cosmic sense. Empowerment, because you realize you have access to the same inner resources that have carried others through the same archetypal trials. Solitude also allows you to work with the material of the collective unconscious consciously. Through practices like active imagination, meditation, or even artistic creation, you can invite these images to take form, to move, and to speak. You may dialogue with an inner figure that represents wisdom or confront a monstrous image that embodies fear. These encounters, though they occur in the landscape of the mind, can shift the course of your outer life because they integrate parts of the psyche that have been dormant or repressed. This process is not always comfortable. The collective unconscious contains not only the luminous archetypes of the hero, the sage, and the creator, but also the darker figures, the destroyer, the betrayer, the shadow in all its forms. Meeting these forces can feel like meeting something alien, yet they too are part of you and part of humanity's story. In solitude, you have the space to confront them without fleeing into distraction, to understand them without immediately projecting them onto others. The more you integrate these elements, the more whole you become. And as you grow in wholeness, you also grow in your ability to navigate the outer world. You are no longer as easily swayed by surface impressions because you recognize the deeper patterns playing out beneath them. You see the archetypes moving through people and situations, and this recognition grants you both insight and compassion. You understand that others too are acting out roles shaped by forces they may not even be aware of. Ultimately, a deeper connection to the collective unconscious is a deeper connection to the essence of life itself. It dissolves the illusion of separateness without erasing individuality. You remain yourself, with your own memories, choices, and path, but you are also rooted in the shared ground of the human soul. And in this space, solitude is no longer emptiness. It becomes a meeting place where the ancient and the personal, the universal and the unique, come together in a dialogue that shapes the way you live, the way you love, and the way you understand your place in the world. From the time we are young, we are fed a story that somewhere out there is another person who will complete us. Fairy tales, songs, and movies repeat the idea that we are each only half a soul, wandering the earth in search of our missing piece. While this notion is romantic, it is also dangerous because it subtly teaches us that we are not enough on our own, that our worth is contingent on being chosen, and that our lives are somehow incomplete until another person fills the empty spaces inside us. But the truth is, you were never half to begin with. The journey is not about finding someone to complete you. It is about remembering and reclaiming your own wholeness. To become whole means to gather all the scattered parts of yourself and bring them home. It means owning both your light and your shadow, your strengths and your wounds, your passions and your fears. It is the process of integrating every facet of your being into one cohesive self, not a fractured identity endlessly seeking repair through someone else's love. And while relationships can reflect parts of us back to ourselves, the deep work of becoming whole must be done within, not outsourced to the presence of another. When you live as if you are incomplete, you inevitably approach relationships from a place of need rather than abundance. You look for someone to soothe your insecurities, to affirm your value, to rescue you from your loneliness. In doing so, you hand them the keys to your happiness, making your sense of self dependent on their actions, moods, and availability. This creates a fragile foundation. One small shift in the relationship and the structure of your identity begins to crack. Solitude offers a powerful antidote to this pattern because it forces you to confront the parts of yourself you have been outsourcing to others. Without a partner to lean on emotionally, you begin to discover your own capacity for comfort, validation, and support. You learn to be your own witness, to acknowledge your feelings, to celebrate your achievements, to hold yourself through disappointment. This is not a rejection of love, but a reclamation of your power to stand on your own. Becoming whole also requires facing the parts of yourself you have hidden or denied. Many of these are the qualities you have deemed unacceptable, the anger you suppress, the vulnerability you disguise, the desires you've been told are selfish. In relationships, it is easy to keep these locked away, fearing rejection if they come to light. Alone, you can meet them without the immediate pressure of someone else's judgment. You can begin to understand their origins, to see how they have shaped your life, and to integrate them into your self-concept. This integration is vital because what we deny in ourselves, we tend to project onto others. If you disown your assertiveness, you may idolize it in someone else or resent it when it confronts you. If you reject your need for tenderness, you may chase it endlessly in your partners, never realizing it is something you can also give yourself. Wholeness dissolves these patterns by bringing what is unconscious into consciousness. The more complete you are within yourself, the less you are driven to seek your missing pieces in others. When you approach life from this state of wholeness, your relationships shift dramatically. You no longer enter them to be saved, but to share, to grow, and to create alongside another whole being. You are able to set boundaries without fear of abandonment because you know your worth is not contingent upon someone staying. You can allow others to be themselves without trying to mold them into the shape of your unmet needs. Love becomes an offering, not a transaction. Becoming whole also transforms the way you experience solitude. For many, being alone feels like an absence, an emptiness that must be filled as quickly as possible. But when you are whole, solitude is not a void. It is a space of richness and self-connection. You can enjoy your own company without restlessly seeking escape. You can create, reflect, and explore without the background hum of needing someone else to validate your existence. Wholeness is not a static state. It is a living, evolving process. Life will still challenge you, reveal new parts of yourself, and occasionally knock you off balance. But the difference is that when you are rooted in your own completeness, you meet these moments with resilience. You are not shattered by rejection because you know you are not defined by someone else's choice. You are not undone by loss because you have built a home within yourself that no one can take away. There is also a spiritual dimension to this journey. Becoming whole reconnects you to the deeper truth that your existence has intrinsic value, independent of any role you play in another's life. You are not a fragment waiting for completion. You are an expression of life itself, already complete at your core. Relationships then become a way to celebrate that completeness, not to compensate for its absence. In many ways, the idea of being half is comforting because it gives us a simple solution: find the missing piece, and all will be well. Wholeness is harder because it requires turning inward, facing uncomfortable truths, and doing the slow, sometimes lonely work of integration. But it is also infinitely more liberating. When you have gathered all of yourself, when you no longer abandon parts of who you are, you carry a quiet strength that no one can diminish. And so the truth becomes clear. You are not walking through life looking for someone to make you whole. You are walking through life as someone who already is. Others may walk beside you, and that companionship can be beautiful, but it is not the source of your completeness. You are the source, and from that place of inner fullness, every connection you form becomes a choice, not a necessity, an act of love freely given, rather than a search for something you believe you lack.